Hello there, it's Sam with a Friday video for you. Talking about reading, writing, and not really arithmetic much in this one, but just all those things together and just what that means for us as writers. Today I want to ask you about mentors in writing. I don't necessarily mean like people in real life who mentor you. Maybe that's a different topic for a different day, but like in the genre of fiction, like the character who is the mentor to the hero. You always have your hero. You always have some different character types. I'm talking like the Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, the original Star Wars, of course, or Alfred Pennyworth to Batman, or Gandalf, or Dumbledore, or Haymitch in the Hunger Games. Those kinds of people. I want to talk about mentors and what it takes to write them well. I'm going to talk about I'm going to hopefully give you some tips and maybe one practical tip that can help you in the days to come as you're writing these characters in your own story. So stick around and I will give you application for writers as well. So mentors, or some people call them the guide either, also. So either term, the mentor, the guide, the, whatever you want to call them. They're all, every story has one, usually an older, wiser figure who the hero goes to for advice, or somehow guides the hero in their journey. It's someone who says like, "I've been here before. I've done what you're doing before, and I'm here to guide you through it." Maybe they haven't always done the exact same thing. Like Alfred was never a vigilante necessarily. Well, let me come back to that in a moment. But I'm taking some of this from actually. Donald Miller building a story brand. You've heard me talk about this before. He applies a story a story trope formula to business and actually makes it work very interestingly. And I've been listening to his stuff for marketing for a little while now. But he calls it the guide, which is similar to the mentor, but he basically refers to those characters as someone who's been there before, who's able to help out the hero, and he talks about positioning yourself as the guide in business. That's kind of a side note, but it is good stuff. I'd recommend it for anyone, but especially authors trying to build their own business or market themselves. It's helpful. But yeah, so the mentor character, I mean, they're usually in the background of a story. Like they're usually not the main character. But the interesting thing is in our day of expanding universes and spin-offs and interconnected universes and things like that, I'm noticing these characters are getting some time in the spotlight lately. There was the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that just aired on Disney Plus a couple months ago, and I know Obi-Wan is a beloved character in Star Wars, and he's been in it for a while. I mean, since the very first Star Wars movie, but he has been kind of a mentor figure and not the main character up till now. In the original trilogy, he's the mentor. In the prequel trilogy, he pretty much is. I mean, Anakin's the main character. I guess in Episode 1, Obi-Wan isn't quite a mentor yet. He becomes that in episodes 2 and 3. He hasn't really had his time in the spotlight as the main character until now. Maybe if you watch the Clone Wars series, kind of, it's an ensemble cast. Anyway, so after 40 plus years or something, this mentor is getting his time in the spotlight. Alfred Pennyworth, there has been a show. I think there's 2 seasons out so far. Maybe more is coming. I'm not sure. There's been a show called Pennyworth about young Alfred Pennyworth. It's following the idea that he was a military man, which some versions of the lore do explore that. So he's not just the old doting butler. He's he can handle himself too. He's good he's able to train Batman, or at least mentor Batman and hold his own if someone breaks into the Wayne Manor or something like that. I watched that show maybe a year ago, and I mean as a show, it was not the best or worst I've ever seen, and I watched a lot of superhero shows. It was entertaining, certainly, and I don't think it became like the biggest superhero show out there or sweeping the nation or anything, but it's interesting to me that a show about Alfred Pennyworth, like young Alfred Pennyworth, exists, and it's out there, and people are, and it had 2 seasons on major network television. Means it must have had at least some success. I mean, at least some people have seen it. They're hardcore nerds like me who watch every Marvel and DC thing pretty much they can get their hands on. And I mean, I made a point in a talk some time ago. I was talking with my friend Tess on her podcast. You can go through and find that video if you want to. It's probably from a year ago. Her podcast is called It's Lit Time, and I was like, all this all these spin-offs and such about focusing on the mentor, they help me realize that people aren't tired of superheroes yet, or I mean, I should say heroes in general, because Obi-Wan is also in there, but like the fact that we're doing all these spin-offs and all these different variations, as I call them, variations on a theme, shows that there's still room for, I guess there's still an audience for these different stories and for people who want to follow these universes and follow these worlds and have more heroes to root for. So now we're living in an age where the mentors are turning into heroes of their own right. Harry Potter, the Secrets of Dumbledore just came out a couple of months ago. We haven't watched it yet. We've been busy, and honestly, Harry Potter is more my wife's thing than mine. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed getting into it, but I have not watched the new movie yet. Um, but yeah, it's Dumbledore who in the original in the original series is like the Gandalf figure, the old wise wizard. Secrets of Dumbledore is him as a young man, or at least the last two Fantastic Beasts movies had him as a young man, and I guess he wasn't the main character of those movies, but he was in it as a young man, and just it's kind of exploring his background and things like that. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, again, I mentioned it shows that these fandoms and such, they're successful. People still want more, and yeah, I mean, I know there's the risk of oversaturating the market, and the risk of if you make more and more content, not all of it is good, and fans get tired of it eventually. I know some people are feeling that way about the Marvel Universe right now, and I've shared my thoughts on that elsewhere. I won't delve too deeply into that right now. I mean, if you are feeling that way, I get where you're coming from. I mean, I'm still a fan. I'm still along for the ride, but I understand how it's not the same as it was maybe 10 years ago or before Endgame, before the big climax of the universe. Anyway, different topic, but just the fact that we have these mentor stories or these spin-off stories. I guess not all of them are about the mentors. Some of them are about the sidekicks or whatever, but or other minor characters being developed. But it just shows me that these franchises, these fandoms, these great epic stories, even though some of them are quote unquote over, or we've seen them before, people are finding new angles on them because people still want these stories and still want to tell them. And that's part of our human mythology of finding new ways to tell old stories and just finding new angles and things. So I think it's really interesting. We could say more about that elsewhere, but I wanted to give you some practical advice as a writer. The mentor figure, when you have that figure in your writing, has to be a real character too. It can't be a trope. I mean, yes, there are tropes. You always have tropes. That's you can't really get away from that. I've started off referring to these as basically a trope. All those characters that I mentioned play a similar function in their original stories. So yes, there is a trope, but your character can't be just a trope. Your character has to be a real human, fleshed out character too. Sometimes it's hard to do with the mentor. Sometimes they don't get, they but just by nature don't usually get as much screen time, at least at first, as the hero. Sometimes they die off in the middle of the story because that's part of the hero's journey and part of the hero growing independent and things like that. Yeah, I think, yeah. Anyway, I'm just trying to think if all the characters I mentioned had died. Don't want to spoil anything. I mean, anyway. In the main universe of comics, Alfred will never die because nobody stays dead. But in at least some alternate universes, he's died. Anyway, yeah. But so the mentor sometimes is just a background character. Sometimes it's the one who dies early on, but you still want to flesh them out and still want to want to make sure that they're a realized human character on their own. And I think a great way to do that would be to write maybe a short story, a side story, or something like that, where your mentor is the main character. It doesn't have to be a long project unless you just really, really want to delve into this and you have the time to do so. It doesn't have to mean you're publishing a whole cinematic universe. Sometimes we have trouble just getting our first book out there. It may not be something you publish for a long time, if ever. But at least for yourself, at least just for your internal canon, and so that character's background. Write something short or longer if you have the time and energy that focuses on your mentor as the main character. So I actually did this recently. I wasn't necessarily trying to do it just like as a writing exercise, but I had an interesting idea, and I wrote a story that was unintentionally a lot like the Kenobi series. Well, not a lot like, just a similar premise. So here's my main characters in Fractured Heroes, the story, the novel that I'm looking to publish, and the mentor figure. This guy is called the White Knight. He's kind of the Superman of my universe. He's the original superhero, the one everyone looks up to, the idealistic good guy, and yet at the time of the story, he's disappeared. Like he's like, oh, he was here 10 years ago, and he's gone because the mentor often, or the god or whatever, often isn't around. I later reveal who he is and things like that, and what happened to him and why. But he's still alive. But basically, there's in my history there of my world, there's like 10 years or so where he's in self-imposed exile, or he's still living in the city but undercover, just living as a normal person in his secret identity, not being a superhero. So kind of like Obi-Wan, kind of like Obi-Wan during his 10 years or 20 years on Tatooine. And so I had at some point during one of my reading sessions when I was reading part of my book to someone. I don't remember the exact conversation. I feel like I got the idea from our mutual writers group for the Inklings, or writers forum that we do sometimes. Someone asked, like, what was he doing all the time? Like what was his life like? And I was like, I want to write a short story about that. I feel like that's where I got the idea. I don't remember for certain, but I wrote a story where basically, and it's it was just maybe 10 pages. It wasn't long, but I kind of used that as a distraction from my editing in the past couple months. I was like, if I'm not up for editing, I'll work on this story instead. This minor story that maybe one day after I publish, I'll put it out in an anthology collection or something. I don't know yet. It's way in the future, but yeah, I have this story about the White Knight. Well, but he's not the White Knight. It's a secret identity. When he's stopped being the White Knight and he's living as a normal man, supposedly, but he's just it's like he's still looking for ways to help. He's still looking for ways to kind of he's coping with the loss of that part of his identity, and he's kind of looking for ways to still be a hero, even if he can't do so outwardly or overtly. And that leads him to get involved in the community, and he finds this girl he's able to help. I mean, I won't tell you all of it because there could be some spoilers for things later. But and it's mostly not a superhero story. I mean, yes, it takes place in the universe, but like he doesn't put the costume on at any point in the story. He just ends up helping this person and confronting some criminals who were involved in this girl's life. Anyway, there's this cool showdown that I was like, wouldn't it be cool if he gets involved? And then, the criminals have no idea he's really the White Knight. They think he's just this guy, this semi-retired guy, but he's not. And I was like, cool idea in my mind. I wrote the story, read it to a couple people just in our group, including my wife, and got good feedback. Still need to polish it, of course. But anyway, my point is, yeah, I wrote a story that was also like Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's about a semi-retired hero living in exile of his own making, somewhat, and then still trying to be a hero, or still trying to do the right thing in that time. And that it was just cool to play in this world and to get a perspective on a different character, get a new perspective on a different character who's usually not the main character. But I was like, now he is, now he is, and I have to at least in some ways explore his thought process in his mind, and his feelings, which I hadn't always done in my initial story. So that, I mean, hopefully will add some depth to the character, if not. And even if the reader doesn't know about it or doesn't know about it for a long time, it's in my mind as the writer, so I know that character better, and hopefully it'll help me to write him better in the future. So my advice to you, if you're writing a mentor one, make sure that character is fleshed out well too, and a good exercise for doing that, if you have the time or energy, is to write a short story or even a longer story or something like that, where your mentor is the main character, a backstory for them, and figure out from there how that's affected them and what they bring to the table there. Hope that helps. Hope you keep writing and just keep doing all the things you're trying to do. And we'll all keep cheering each other on our writing journeys and see where we go. Have a great one. May the force be with you this weekend. Bye.